Gallus was a eunuch priest of the Phrygian goddess Cybele and her consort Attis, whose worship was incorporated into the state religious practices of ancient Rome. About the Galli. The first Galli arrived in Rome when the Senate officially adopted Cybele as a state goddess in 204 BC. Roman citizens were prohibited from becoming Galli, which meant that all the Galli were Orientals or slaves. Under Claudius, this ban was lifted. Eventually Domitian reaffirmed that Roman citizens were forbidden to practice evaratio. The Galli castrated themselves during an ecstatic celebration called the Dies Sanguinis, or Day of Blood, which took place on March 24. At the same time they put on women's costume, mostly yellow in color, and a sort of turban, together with pendants and earrings. They also wore the hair long, and bleached, and wore heavy makeup. They wandered around with followers, begging for charity, in return for which they were prepared to tell fortunes. On the day of mourning for Attis, they ran around wildly and disheveled. They performed dances to the music of pipes and tambourines, and, in an ecstasy, flogged themselves until they bled. Origins of the name. Stephanus Byzantinus said that the name came from King Gallus. Ovid says that the name is derived from the Gallus River in Phrygia. The term Gallus is also a multiple pun in Latin, meaning a Gaul or a rooster, as well as a castrated priest. While these efforts at folk etymologies were widespread in classical times, it has been suggested that Gallu comes from the Sumerian Gal meaning great, and Lu meaning man. Humans are sexually ambivalent demons that freed Inanna from the underworld. They originally seem to have been consecrated to the god Enki. By coincidence, there was a category of Mesopotamian priests called Kallu in Sumerian Gala. These priests played the tympanum and were involved in bull sacrifice. Another category of Mesopotamian priests called Asinus Galatur and Kurguru had sacred function. These transgender eunuch priests participated in liturgical rites, during which they were costumed and masked. They played music, sang, and danced, most often in ceremonies dedicated to the goddess Ishtar. The Galli in Attis. Fundamental to understanding the meaning and the function of the myth and ritual related to Attis in Rome is his relationship with the Galli. The role of prototype of the mythical castration of Attis for the institution of the priesthood of the Galli has almost always been emphasized, even if to different degrees. Scholars have attempted to draw a connection between the episode of the castration of Attis and the ritual mutilation of the Galli as a reflection, in myth, of a secondary ritual action, or conversely, as the mythical foundation of a ritual action. This kind of interpretation appears to be too simplistic, as, to some extent, it fails to consider that this connection has served different purposes in different periods. The emasculation of Attis in the Phrygian version of the myth is the basis for an institution that is both political and religious. The institution of his priests in Pessinus, the non-kings, who don't simply coincide with the Galli. The earliest references to the Galli come from the Anthologia Palatina, although they don't explicitly mention emasculation. More interesting is the fragment attributed to Callimachus, in which the term Galli denotes castration that has taken place. Arca Galas. The high priests are well documented from archaeology. At Pessinus, the center of the Cybele cult, there were two high priests during the Hellenistic period, one with the title of Attis, and the other with the name of Attis. Both were eunuchs. The high priests had considerable political influence during this period, and letters exist from a high priest Attis to the kings of Pergamon, who means two, and Attalis two, inscribed on stone. Later, during the Flavian period, there was a college of 10 priests, not castrated, and now Roman citizens but still using the title Attis. In Rome, the head of the Galli was known as the Arca Galas, at least from the period of Claudius on. A number of archaeological finds depict the Arca Galas wearing luxurious and extravagant costumes. The Arca Galas was always a Roman citizen chosen by the Quindecim Viri Sacris Faciendis, whose term of service lasted for life. Being a Roman citizen, as well as being employed by the Roman state, meant that the Arca Galas had to preserve the traditions of Cybele's cult while not violating Roman prohibitions in religious behavior. Hence, some argue that the Arca Galas was never a eunuch, as all citizens of Rome were forbidden from emasculation. However, under Claudius, Roman citizens were permitted to be castrated up until the reign of Domitian. The signs of his office have been described as a type of crown, possibly a laurel wreath, as well as a golden bracelet known as the arquebus. Along with the institution of the Arca Galas came the Phrygian sanctuary, as well as the right to the Tower of Olium as it pertains to the Magna Mater. Two aspects of the Magna Mater's cultus that the Arca Galas held dominion over